Today, I'd like to talk about China's ocean of change. I'm the chairperson of one of the leading environmental organizations in China, and I've been working in China on this issue since 2007. And today, I'd like to share with you 2 or 3 stories, depending on time allotment. The first is the transition of China from the factory of the world to the clean tech laboratory of the world. And the second one is how we've become the smart city playground of the world. China's green journey really begins in 2007, as this chart clearly shows. The age of renewables only began a decade ago, unbelievably. So this rapid 10-year green journey, in 2020, our goal is to get to 15% renewables, and by 2030, 20%. Now, I know that sounds like a low number compared to, let's say, Costa Rica or Denmark, but for us to do that, it means to essentially build net zero energy, the equivalent of all the power in the US. And what you see is huge investments in renewables. You probably know this already. For growth with less limits. So in 2011, 2012, 2013, you really saw this huge curve upswing in renewables in China. It was really the tipping point where China started to take over the world in renewables. What's remarkable, and the story isn't told very well outside China, is that there is a rapid decline in China's coal use. In fact, last year, they closed over 1,000 plus mines and stopped construction on over 100 coal plants. And what you see is the ambition to not only reduce coal use, but to cap it completely. And this means capping total energy consumption. It means capping total coal consumption. And we're shrinking the energy mix of coal down to 58%. And again, that's a tremendous change for a country like China. In fact, the Paris goals of peaking emissions by 2030 are going to be met even before 2030 at this rate. So in 10 short years, the tremendous story is that China has decoupled growth, economic growth, and energy use. Now, I think California has done that. I think Sweden has done that. But for a country the size of China, that's quite incredible. And that gives hope for all countries around the world. This, unfortunately, is the picture out of my back window in Shanghai. And this is pretty much a regular scene in the last 10 years. However, I will say that in the last about 6 months or more, I have not had to use my air filter, and I've had plenty of days like this. This is an incredible shift in such a short time, especially when you compare it to London or California, where it took really over 100 years to get to where they are after polluting and thousands of people dying from pollution. Going beyond this, there's so many things that I could tell you about how much money and how fast China is experimenting with clean tech. But I think one of the most important things China is doing this year is launching a carbon emissions trading scheme. So a price on coal is what's going to further accelerate the greening of China. I'd like to share with you why this is happening, a little bit about the mentality of our leadership. So the last administration led by Hu Jintao were really technocrats. They're scientists and engineers, and so they thought about rapid infrastructure growth. That's why China has the largest high-speed rail network. It has the largest urbanization ever. It's been building cities incredibly fast. But now we have Xi Jinping, and his administration has scientists and engineers, but a lot of economists, what I call the tech-economist administration. And now they're focused on smarter and steady growth, not just rapid infrastructure growth. This is compared to, let's say, a country like America, where most of the leaders are lawyers or reality TV show stars. So instead of just focusing on transactions, Chinese people are focused on systems. This is incredibly important when it comes to sustainability and making change at city scale. Another secret to China's harmonious growth is it's mandatory government training. If you are a mayor, like one of these 50 sitting here, you would have to take 12 days of training, mandatory training each year, in one of these types of academies. I happen to be a professor at the China Academy of Governance. JUICE has taught over 1,000 mayors and urban planners on how to build eco-cities since 2008. They also work like a multinational corporation. So you probably have heard of our 5-year plans, which have very specific numerical targets about reducing carbon emissions, reducing water pollution, increasing reforestation, and all sorts of good things. Well, this is not just national ambitions. It goes down to the province level, the city level, the individual people who are responsible. Their names, their heads, literally, are on these policies. They're responsible for making this change happen. Now, this change is happening at huge scale, at China scale and China pace. Just to give you an example, in 2007, our first program at JUICE was to introduce smart grid into China. And this resulted after 3 of these types of forums with, let's say, the CEO of Duke Energy or the head of smart grid at IBM and Cisco and people like McKinsey, Lawrence Livermore National Lab, all these types of amazing leaders in smart grid. We had 3 meetings in China to explain what the benefits of smart grid were. And in 2.5 years, this China state grid announced a $7.2 billion investment, US dollars, to implement smart grid across their grid by 2020. Now, they cover 80% of China. In one of our forums at Yangzhou, the mayor got so excited about the job opportunities for smart grid, he then committed to building China's first smart grid business hub. In 9 months, I was literally cutting the ribbon. China scale, China pace. So all of this experimenting, luckily, has turned China from the factory of the world to the clean tech laboratory of the world. And I say luckily, it's really for everybody else, for developing nations around the world. They get to benefit from the money that China has put in, the mistakes that China has made, but the learnings of how to commercialize this technology at affordable prices. So again, Xi Jinping, techonomist, smarter, steady growth. So he's focused on efficiency, cutting costs. And so as part of this, he's put in, for example, $5 billion subsidy in 5 years to new energy vehicles. I was just having a conversation backstage about how China's ports are going to be quickly all electrified. This is an example of robots sorting packages in a factory. And is it moving? Let's see. Oops. Well, I'm not quite sure how to play this video. Okay. Well, anyway, it's a video of how basically this factory is completely roboticized, right? Is it moving? Oh, okay. So it's sort of like Roomba for logistics. So another thing that's happening is JD.com, one of the largest retailers online, is now experimenting with drones that can airlift 1 ton, right, which will be great for rural e-commerce logistics. So China now is the leader in drones, and I would say VR as well. So China is really innovating not just in clean tech, not just at a city scale, but with software and innovation, with creativity and efficiency. So I think you'll be quite surprised at what comes down the pike from China in terms of bringing eco-solutions all across the world. So again, the keys to China is that we're led by very practical, systems-minded leaders. They have tremendous willingness to invest in growth with less limits, and willingness to experiment at city scale. So, for example, electric vehicles, they'll say 15 cities, you be the national pilots for electric vehicles. Today, we have 400 smart city pilots. So, obviously, they're not all going to win, but some of them will succeed and will learn and then will scale nationwide. And they have a very business-like approach to governance. Now, with my 3 minutes left, I'm just going to quickly jump to 1 + 1 = 11 along the Belton Road. If you haven't heard of the Belton Road yet at this conference, I'm sure you will, but it is going to be this 50 to 100-year vision that will completely, dramatically change the entire way humanity is connected, not just through logistics, but also through culture. Success, any part of this success, means 80% of global GDP growth by 2050 will come from this Belton Road. It will effectively eradicate all poverty in the world. 3 billion people will be lifted into the middle class. So there's a tremendous financial commitment, 1.4 trillion, many new banks, special lending schemes for developing nations, but also things like billions of dollars for poverty alleviation along the Belton Road, training for vocational workers, scholarships for students. China is also creating international trade expos to highlight the goods from the Belton Road countries into China. In fact, it's committed to buying $2 trillion of goods over the next 5 years from Belton Road countries. Chinese have a saying, build a road first if you want to get rich. 要享福, 先修路. So this is probably the epitome of this saying, right? But for every $1 billion of infrastructure, they say, it will generate 30,000 to 80,000 jobs. This means trade equals prosperity, equals peace, and mutual understanding. 1 + 1 = 11. China is also moving, as it develops from heavy manufacturing to light manufacturing to services economy, it's moving 85 million jobs in light manufacturing out of China. To where? Well, Southeast Asia is part of it, but also places like Africa. My friend Helen Hai, the UNIDO ambassador for China, consults to 8 presidents of Africa to try to help create manufacturing in Africa to take the load out of China. This is an example of a Chinese factory worker introducing best practices to African workers in Ethiopia. The first country she worked in, she created a shoe factory where there's 2,000 jobs the first year, 3,000 by the third year. So she's replicating this all over Africa. I think the saying, don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. But just walk beside me and be my friend, is really the attitude that Xi Jinping in China is bringing to the countries along the Belton Road. So I welcome you to come visit me and other companies and local governments in China to figure out how you can benefit by this 50-year vision. Thank you.